Hola, audiencia, y bienvenidos a Oye Cinema Club. I am tonight's host, Jason Ishmael Eccles, and I am joined by a illustrious panel of co-hosts, Don Dino Spezzini and Marina, the dignified couch potato. Um, Tonight we are reviewing the 1983 Criterion film, apparently, Videodrome, starring James Wood, directed by David Cronenberg. Okay, the reason I picked this film is because simply, I was looking for something that came out closer to the 80s when I was born. And I thought about it. I was I was just going through the box covers of, movies that it came out that were on the 1001 movies you must see before you die list. And I was looking at the 80s and I saw this thing and I said, oh, never seen this. This box looks creepy and weird. Let's go into it. Didn't even know that was James Wood. I thought maybe it could be him, but I didn't know it was him. So it was. Yeah, and this movie is weird and strange and provocative and kind of like foreshadowing a lot about the future. And I'm sure we're gonna have tons of conversations like that. So let's jump right into it. Um, Marina, why don't you bless us with your very first impression of this film?
Yes, this was definitely the first time I've watched it. I'd never heard of it before. And honestly, this is probably one of the weirdest movies I've ever watched in my life. My first impression was like, what the heck is going on? like I feel like every time Jason picks a movie, I feel like it's like the beginning of like a Scooby-Doo episode or a Boxcar Children book. Like, what did he get us into this time? Like, what is going
Right.
on here? I was so creeped out. I thought I could eat dinner while I watched it.
Oh boy.
Joke was absolutely on me. Super creepy. I will say though, like you said, a lot of like the technology messaging and the like there's a lot of messaging in there that was very, very interesting that they made something like that like in a conspiracy way, but very interesting how life is super unfolded. Like, a lot of that content which was like so risque is like an HBO show now. Like it's just like a typical family show. But yeah, first impression, I can't eat whatever I was eating that night ever again,
Oh my
but
god.
there was a lot to learn for from it. I definitely.
Sorry about that.
Yep.
Sorry about your dinner.
How long did you have dinner before you realized like, no, let me put this dinner away? Or did you just like, I'm committed. Gotta eat it before it gets cold.
No, I didn't eat. I still haven't eaten. I watched the movie 2 days ago. I'm kidding, no. It was definitely like 2 to 3 bites, and I was just kept waiting for a non-weird part so I could finish, but I didn't
Oh
finish
my
my dinner
god.
till after it was over. Yeah, for sure.
Yikes. All right, Dino, how about your first impression?
Yeah. I don't know what we watched. I clearly still trying to figure it out. My aunt was even like, "Oh, what movie did you watch?" Right? And I was like, "I don't know how to explain it." It it is really weird. Um, I went kind of blind. I didn't look anything up. I knew it was Criterion also, but boy, I do like the graininess of the movie. It reminded me of They Live and those kind of movies of that
Sure.
time, that kind of focusing kind of against the status quo and on like just paranoia and brainwashing, if you will, or dare I say, propaganda. So yeah, so I was thinking of that, and then early on, for a second, I was like, "Is this the Army Hammer biopic?" Because when they start getting it on, and he's like putting the needle in her ear and all that, then he's licking in the blood, and I was like, "Oh boy." And she's like burning and wants to get cut, and I'm like, this is gonna go in a real dark direction pretty soon. But they went away from that and went to even darker. realm, literally realm. So yeah, very interesting, very weird. Still, clearly, I'm trying to figure out exactly what I think of this movie, but hopefully, as we talk out loud, I'll come up with a better understanding.
Absolutely. My first impression is similar to both of you guys. Fortunately, I wasn't eating dinner, but I will say that this is my first time seeing the film. And I had a lot of feelings about it, and I'm still very confused about it. So I'm really glad I got you guys to sort of talk this thing through. Um, yeah, this thing is about so much, but also like it's a product of its time, and also it is sort of like predictive measuring the future in a way that is interesting because I feel like a lot of it sort of has panned out. There's one comment in particular that was like, wait a minute, like you nailed it. And this movie came out 40 years ago. Um,
Whoa!
what'd you say?
I said whoa.
I mean, 1983, this thing came out. Um, so, anyways, a young James Wood, also shocker. I also thought that was like John Turturro in the film, but I guess it wasn't. Uh,
the yeah no
the video editor guy or whatever
yeah
that is.
the audio the
Yeah, the
AV
audio
guy.
guy. So yeah, those were my first impressions of the movie. But let's jump right into the nitty gritty. This thing. I got a couple questions for you guys actually. So this thing like precursors like YouTube and content creation. And that's really what this movie's about. It's about content creation. And this guy's doing it for a job in the 80s. He's got like, I guess, I don't know, his own production company or, whatever they're doing. They're producing content. And it's funny now because everybody's a content creator and everybody's selling anything that they can sell, anything they can peddle, and it finds its audience. But then, like, this movie also suggests brainwashing and programming from the things that you watch. And it's all conspiratorial in a way, the way that they sort of set it up, but also, all of it to be true at the same time, because obviously what you watch does program you. It's called programming, but it does. I mean, there's another line, I should have wrote it down, where they talked about like how the window or the eyes are like the something to the television screen. Do you guys remember that line?
Um,
I think so. It was
I
the
the one
lady
I
said that.
remember.
The lady said it.
What's that?
Did the lady say that?
I
No.
forget who said it. There was a couple things in there um, that were just really, really good lines that kind of like, you know,
The one
sort
that
of.
stuck out to me that I wrote down is TV is reality and reality is less than TV,
Mm, yeah, that
which
was one of those sort of memorable lines.
which I think has to do with today, which not so much TV, but social media and, like you said, YouTubers and reality shows, and it's just this idea, the idea of like something you're watching on a screen tends to be more real than you just living your life or seeing people out and about. So that's
Yeah,
the
for
the
sure.
one that I wrote down.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
also it reminds me of what's the so you were saying VHS, and that was a thing back in the day, right? You'd have to get like sports bloopers VHS, or like America's Funniest Home Videos type of thing, or seeing like just randomly picking up VHSs that had like an interesting title or whatever that you might think um would be any good. So I put this as like, oh, because he was getting content for this channel that's kind of a pirated channel, and so I'm like, this is like a early OnlyFans where
It
people
was like a
can,
snuff film, right?
yeah, 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 yeah. And because then I was like, oh, this is like a backwards webcam rooms, like all the like documentaries and all that, usually about like webcam girls, they're in cubicles, right? They're in these little cubicles doing the webcam and stuff like that with a little background. Yet he goes to that place in Pittsburgh, which I think was an old church or something like that. And there it's all divided with cubicles, and you sit and watch, your king. And I was just like, wow, this is clearly, it's still the same idea that they were kind of pointing out of what people's minds are going to be doing for the next, however long we have technology. And now it's kind of that has flipped because there's way more there. I mean, anonymity, everything. In this, did they talk about choosing your own name? Was that a thing? Was a doctor or whatever
Yeah,
he?
that was one of the lines where he said that in the future you're going to choose your own name and whatever is going to be your weird something that he said. And I was like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah, dignified couch potato there, and watch, laugh, cry. You know, that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh yeah, everyone has a handle now.
Yeah.
For the most part. Because usually for multiple reasons, but one of
So
them
my
is
question to
definitely.
you guys is how much of this is good writing or how much of this is like, well, obviously this is what the future is going to be. And how brilliant is, I don't know who wrote this. I don't know if Cronenberg wrote this or
He
not, but
he he wrote it, or at least he was one of the writers. But yeah, I
so what do you guys
he
make of that? Like how does someone look at the technology we have now and maybe some understanding of what's to come next and put it together that this is exactly what we're all sort of doing?
I think
so
maybe. Oh, I was
no,
just gonna say.
you go.
I was just gonna say. I feel like it's historically the next generation judges the like the last generation judges the next generation. So like, um, if anything, I felt like judgment of the future, which is a lot easier than like writing like progression of the future. Like it just seems like whoever wrote this thing thought that like we're all brainwashable and the world's gonna end. It just felt like very much like that old grumpy guy at the end of
Mhm.
the block who wrote this movie. So it's probably more fear than it was predicting.
Yeah,
Um, and it just so happens that
the
things have
fears
aligned.
came true.
Yeah. I don't know,
The
not to
old
just
grumpy guy at the end of the block was right.
say
He was
it feels like
right.
a conspiracy theory
Yeah.
if you guys more than it feels like someone's imaginative writing. It feels more like the way
But
these
that's
young
the thing. It does feel like a conspiracy. A conspiracy that like came true.
yeah.
So I
That's
get
what this
there's
movie feels like.
Yeah.
so there's this. What you ask, I feel like is kind of in multiple things, but like writing wise, and I don't know if Marina kind of meant this, but I feel like for the time, it's one of those where it's not that it's aged poorly. I just kind of think like newer media has now captured that idea better. And that could just be because there's also been an evolution of technology. So that just clearly, I mean, the body, yeah, the some of the special effects or body, whatever, like him opening up and let's put a
I like the
cassette in.
practicals.
Oh yeah, the practicals for that. I mean, then he went and did
I
the
wish they
fly.
still use stuff like that in movies today.
Yep,
Not
they went and
CGI
yeah,
everything.
Cronenberg went and did the fly also, right? And it's just like gotta love, even the hokiness of it is very forgivable because what is real and what is just him tripping out, right?
Right.
Because then even the girl wasn't in the bed, so it's just one of those like what are you actually believing? And so for me, that's why it makes total sense.
I feel like they lost me there though. Like I will say, have you guys seen Inception?
Inception, yes.
I just feel like they inceptioned me. Like I'm just like, okay, just throw me a bone. What's real? Like eventually I want to know what's real. Like it
Right.
was the technology was not there enough for me to just live in the mystery. Like, what is really going on? I would have liked more closure on what was real and not.
So you know what this movie feels like? It feels like they shot a whole bunch of scenes that they cut out of this thing when they were making the movie. Like the executives were like, nope, don't need it, get rid of it, take it
Mm-hmm.
out. There was one scene in particular where I saw there was a cut, and when she burns herself with the cigarette, and he's like, no, 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 and she hands the cigarette to him, and he's like, no, 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 and he looks at it and looks back at her. It felt like he was about to go back in and burn her, and I feel like they shot that scene, and the like executives at Universal were like, Cronenberg, no, there's no way he's burning her on camera. Just cut the scene. We don't need it. And then the audience hates him for the rest of the movie for like contributing to her, whatever. And so I
I don't.
feel like they cut that out of the movie. It just feels like there was more film there. And the way it cuts as well, it cuts pretty quickly. And I'm like, interesting. Yeah. Anyways, but I feel like there's a lot of that in this movie. I feel like they this movie probably could have been 2 or 3 different movies with all the different alterations they probably left on the floor here and there. That's just the vibe I get from it.
You know what I forgot to say too in my first impression? I think this is the first time I've ever seen James Woods be the leading man. I
Mm.
don't know if I've ever seen him be the main character of anything before. Like he's always like the detective or the goon sidekick. I don't think I've ever seen him play the main
He
character in
was
anything
the
before.
lead on a TV show called Shark about a
I
lawyer or Shark, something like that. Yeah.
He didn't share the spotlight with anybody on that show. I didn't watch it, but
No, he was the lead, and
Uh,
everybody else around him was kind of like young lawyers. He like was the guy.
I'm gonna look that up because it was kind of I think that also was for me something that was kind of hard to to follow the lead in this. Like I
Yeah.
didn't feel any attachment to him as an actor, so I wasn't
He's
very
not very likable in this movie.
that too.
I mean, James Woods rarely ever likable in anything. But even him playing the
or in
lead, you
real
don't
life
really
now, I believe.
probably real life as well. I've never met him, but he
No,
just
I
doesn't.
think he's gone off the deep end. Is what I'm saying with the whole, I think conservative MAGA and all that kind of crap.
Okay, okay.
Maybe that's who I think it is, unless I'm confusing him with another actor from the '80s. But
Well, either way, in this film, I just feel like you can't really root for him. You don't really care if he even wins or not. Like, I don't care what happens next. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
not next in the story, just to him. Like, if something bad happens to him, you're like, yeah, you kind of deserve it. I just feel like you deserve it. I feel like you're a bad person and you deserve it.
Yeah, definitely wasn't rooting or denying him much. Like I wanted to know what was the deal with this thing, with this television streaming thing. So I feel like the for a lot of it, I just wasn't very connected. Like I was watching a simulation myself or something. Like, is this all an illusion? But I
So this is what I think happens, and you guys tell me if you think I'm wrong. Uh, I think once he puts the headset on, everything after that is a hallucination or whatever. Either he's just flat because we never see him take it off, right? So I think
okay.
once he puts the headset on, everything after that is in that weird world. But I also believe that he might be out there really like killing people for this organization or whatever and doesn't even know it anymore. Because like all the stuff with the big hand, that's not really happening. That's all in his head. So everything where it's like the giant slit on his chest or whatever, all that weirdness, like that's not real. But in his head, it's very real. And I think that he's being programmed to like do assassinations and stuff like that. He's like Lee Harvey Oswald or something.
so I mean, they even mention,
Or not Lee Harvey Oswald, but that one movie where the
yeah.
programs. Yeah, you know what I'm
So
talking about.
so they
Manchurian Candidate.
Oh,
yeah.
gotcha. I just watched
This
that for the first time.
also had a little bit of network for me. Clearly, network is not about you know hallucinogenic or whatever, but there is the paranoia of it and the getting obsessed with what's on a TV screen and all that. But he kind of started hallucinating after watching the video for the first time, which made me think of The Ring, right? Because they were kind of like the only people that start going crazy are the ones that watch the video, and the AV guy didn't actually watch the video, right? And they also said that after he watched the first time is when it started happening. It wasn't when he went to Pittsburgh. It wasn't later. It was him seeing that very first video. Because then they even said that the girl that he was like, that she burned and stuff like that, that she had already been dead from before that. So they bring all that down. Because then I forget what he kind of already hallucinated. I think, before he put in the video, I think from Pittsburgh, and one of those like, the VHS kind of came to life, like, which was a recurring thing, and then the TV with her mouth, like, yeah, there was some great practical stuff. But for me, then I think early on from the movie, if we're to take the word of the bad guys, he was kind of in a hallucinogenic state.
Did
Um,
the practicals in this movie remind you of Nightmare on Elm Street?
yeah,
Like
I
all the
wouldn't be surprised if that's similar crew and stuff.
It feels like it probably was. It feels like
Yeah,
Wes Craven saw this and like, hey, I want that special effects team because they looks like the same kind of work.
yeah,
Um, Also, Poltergeist and The Ring. I feel like all those movies are sort of touching this thing.
yeah.
I
What else did I read?
definitely, I don't know. This is one time where I definitely wish I would have dove in deeper to find out what it was about first, too, because I don't feel like it was something that automatically clicked with me. What was going on? Um, like maybe a trailer or like a quick review. I should have read up.
A trailer would have been helpful.
Yeah.
You're probably right because the 1980s trailers kind of explain stuff. I would imagine this trailer has a voiceover saying, "And then the editor runs into trouble with the devil." It's like now you have an idea.
IMDb just like, because I was looking at the thing, has a really trippy trailer, like one of those I think before they finished filming. So it's a lot of just digital animation with like inlay of like people's faces and stuff like that, and yeah, so it does looks trippy. I don't know what's the sound in it, but really trippy. Um, what was I gonna say? I don't know. I forget.
So, were you guys about to say something?
I don't know. I was just chit chatting. If you had a valid talk.
Do you have
So
a valid thought?
I do. No, I do actually. I because this thing has to work a little bit different than the other ones. Because usually I will ask questions like, what characters did you identify most with?
Yeah,
And like, I'm not asking that for
yeah.
this movie because it's so weird.
The
Um,
lady at the beginning who told him to stay the fudge away. That's who I identify with.
yeah, that's me too. I think me too. I think that's the person that I did too. Easy. Um, what is there a part of this movie that truly confused you, and you're like, what is that about? What are they doing? What are they trying to say?
The whole mother freaking thing. I mean, no.
That's
so
fair.
so wait. I feel like you said we have to do this differently. I feel like we're in therapy after like we've gone through something traumatic. And it's like, did the bad guy touch you here? Like, where did this movie touch you?
It's definitely. I feel like it's an experience. This film. It's not just
Um,
a regular movie. It's an experience, and you're like, what are they trying to say? And even so, maybe more now than it was when it first came out. I feel like this would have been an easy movie to sort of like look past. Like maybe people who like special effects and people who like horror films and that kind of thing. People who like psychological thrillers or what do you call it, mind melding movies. Like
Yeah,
this
body
has a
horror.
sense of all that stuff. Yeah, but then like I feel like after 40 years maybe even less, maybe 30 years, 10 years ago, even like people you have to start looking at this movie a different way. Like it tells a different story about us as humans, this movie, and how we relate to technology and video and cameras. And it's just, it has so much more of a personal, intimate understanding. Like we have, as humans, we have so much more of a personal understanding of video and cameras and stills and photographs and content creation and all that stuff now than anybody would have in 1983, unless you also worked in the editing room of a job like he was or something. Because now everyone creates content and everyone's a voyeur and everyone's those things. And everyone's on the dark side of the internet looking at weird videos of YouTube at 3 a.m. Like it's happened to all of us. So what does
What
that like
I
mean now?
and because I also wrote what would be the new thing, or how would this movie kind of, if it were made now, what what would be the big thing? And I just, earlier today, everything was popping up of what is the Apple goggles or whatever it's called, and like them kind of showing what the FaceTime looks like, and it was just like really weird. And so I was thinking probably something on that line of just like VR, like they're still trying to do VR, and it's gonna, that's what most of those movies are coming, right, from Total Recall and all that. Like, what's reality, right? We look at this screen and what is real. And that always makes me think of back in, I think it was Plato's Republic, where he talks about it's the cave allegory or story of the people that are in shackles, looking at the shadows that are being projected on the walls of this cave from a fire that is behind them, and these people think that that's their reality. And one person is able to get out and kind of sees the real world, and then he keeps going back inside and trying to free the people, and most of them don't want to leave because they're used to what they're seeing, and when they get out, they kind of freak out. So it's definitely that, because going back to of when he started to have the issues, when he first hooked up with the girl, he was even saying like, I got this rash, right? He was already like, I got this, and it kind of got redder and redder before it like freaking opened up. So that's like 10 minutes in, 5 minutes in, and he's already talking about how he gotten infected, basically, whatever he watched.
Yeah, he was affected right away, and the deeper he went into that programming, like the more hypnotized and the more weirder his hallucinations became. Yeah, I think all that's very much a message for really what they're talking about is TV, because I mean,
Yeah,
at that time, that was becoming, every household had one, and there's plenty of stuff in the '80s that's kind of telling you, like the dummy box, the stupid program box, the fool tube, or whatever people used to call it back then. But that's who they're talking about. You're being programmed by, you know, because that's what everybody had access to back then.
yeah.
I was gonna say, to kind of answer your question too about anything that confused me. I think kind of like what the bad guys were doing confused me, because at first I thought their goal was to contaminate everybody, but then it seemed like they
Right.
were anti future. Like I was just kind of confused on what the goal of the bad guys were.
Sure.
Like, did they
It
want
seemed like a
to?
drug. It seemed like they would get them hooked on something. That's what it seemed like. Like they were dealers, because the whole thing of like the people going there in Pittsburgh, although that wasn't necessarily them, that was the daughter of the doctor or whatever. But they all look like drug addicts when he was walking in and walking past them and stuff like that, and and they have the little cubicles. That's what it looked like to me. Was
They were
like they
like
were,
in like a warming station for like homeless people or something.
yeah,
But what I found
yeah,
the most odd about that, I'm glad you brought that up. What I found the most odd about that scene is that everybody had a TV in their little cubicle.
yeah.
And I'm
And
like,
that's what I
what?
meant. Yeah, was set up.
So the
Like they,
lady, the guy that they killed on TV, on that content thing, that was his daughter in the place.
No, no, that was the woman that got killed was the woman that worked as the reporter at the station or whatever. The one he
yeah,
originally was trying to date from the interview.
Not her, the lady that like he goes to later on again, because he went the first time and she's like, I don't
yeah,
know anything, and he was like, ask your dad.
Yeah,
yeah,
that she's the daughter of the guy, I guess, who also got caught up in the video drones. But she is the one who also worked at the warming station for the homeless people, or whatever it was.
yeah.
I was just confused whether or not she and the two guys, the one that like was working with him and was like undercover a part of this organization, were they on the
Mhm.
same team or were they against each other?
Against each
Against
other.
each other. Because
Okay.
she's the one that frees his mind somehow, or, and that's where the
She like
inception thing could
reprogrammed him.
happen. Yeah, that's where maybe the inception thing is what you're seeing, because he was set to do, he killed his partners, and then he was supposed to kill her and finish off the group, and she was able to somehow switch it up and like
Mhm.
go kill them, right? And then that's when he went and killed the AV guy and the guy on stage. Now that being said, I also found that interesting was in that first interview on TV, the guy in the TV was like, "I never appear in TV unless I'm on TV." Something like that. And then I thought it was so interesting and so cool of how then the daughter was kind of like, oh yeah, he pre-recorded thousands of that, and that to me sounded like those scientists that talk about how you can upload your whole existence, and even though your body dies, your consciousness is going to continue and live on as an entity. And I felt like that's kind of an early on film, at least of what I remember of what I've seen, where someone kind of does that. People think that he's alive, but he's just gone and filmed all this
So when he
information,
was doing
monologues.
the TV show, that guy had already been dead,
Yeah,
basically.
yes,
Interesting. Have you
for
guys seen that
years.
TV show Upload before?
I
It's on
What show?
Amazon. It's called Upload. And it's about like if you're gonna die, um, if you're like dying or you can upload your thoughts. Um,
Is it a
and
comedy? I thought it was maybe a response to The Good Place. Am I mistaken? Is it
I've
like a
never
light?
I've never seen The Good Place. It's not a spoof. Is that the word by any means? I don't feel like
No,
it's
comedy.
it's just about a girl who works at the upload center falling in
Oh,
love
okay.
with one of the guys who uploaded his
Uh,
mind. And if you're rich, you can retire at like a very nice virtual place with like
right.
concierge and things. And if you're poor, you'll end up at like in the projects.
Yeah,
It just depends on what you can afford when you retire slash die. But it's very, very much that, like all your thoughts being uploaded before you
yeah.
die.
Yeah, so that's what I thought of, with that guy already being on tape, right? Just for, and that gets now in today's day and age. I mean, didn't Elon they just started testing with whatever that chip is?
Right.
Uh, Supposedly, they've started the testing with implants. But yeah, the AI, the videos at this point where get edited, and all of a sudden it's like, what is real? It's becoming to that point, like people doing the AI and the photo. Before it was just photoshops, now it's voice AI. Everything is getting to the point where it's just you really have to, unless you're live with a person, you don't, especially now with celebrities and politicians and all those deep fakes and everything, it's just like, unless you're one on one with another human being, we just don't know if it's real.
Yeah.
even then.
I am curious though. You said you're curious how this was 40 years ago. I definitely think wherever technology was at the time, yeah, it probably was just like a mystery. Just like when you would watch like Back to the Future or something, like it's more of an intriguement. But since technology has gotten like super advanced, it is like, wow, this is like almost like a relic, like Egyptian writing on the wall kind of thing. But yeah, I'm
It is
curious.
starting to feel that way.
I'm curious how well it did. Like, did people like it when it came out? Like, I know it was on that list, but like, did it? A lot
How
of
did
people go.
people respond to it? So I was curious about that too. I don't know about too much about how people responded to it when it came out. I do know that it had a budget of just under $6 million,
Ooh.
like 5.952. Like they were very specific about the number. But then it only made 2.1 at the box office, so it was a bomb. People did
But
not show up
yeah,
at theaters to watch this in 1983.
it has a pretty decent, on IMDb it's 7 out of 10, and
I think
yeah,
this would be considered a cult classic.
yeah. There's also, oh yeah, they talked. So she was part of a new organization trying to do called New Flesh, and she kind of made him into New Flesh, or
That's
that
right.
was supposed to be the next thing, which that in itself is also a mind fuck. I was like, what? Wait, there's so many. Yeah, there was so much going on.
He was
Um,
programmed new flesh. He became new flesh, like he became the one that was going to kill the Videodrome or
yeah,
whatever. Like
it reminded me also a little bit of Brazil. So that's the other thing. Like there are movies like Brazil and other movies that we have reviewed, even that have similar, like similar themes. Like what the fuck was the theme of this one? But just
I
similar
think this one is
ideas.
right along the lines is stuff like they, just a little bit more subliminal.
Yeah, and so maybe it's harder to swallow in that sense because it just seems a little more disjointed, and that could be on purpose, and what we are supposed to follow or what we're supposed to believe, right? It's one of those to like kind of jolt your senses, right?
Would
Because the whole
anybody like to hear the filmmaker talk about this movie and what he was thinking, anything like that?
like ever or right this minute
I know,
or
I don't mean right
when
now. I just mean like,
uh
would you be curious to know? Like, does this movie set off enough like stimulus where you're like, hey, you know what? I need to learn more about what's going on here because something about this doesn't sit right, or it's haunting, or I just need to know more because to me it feels like they very much have a message. It's not super clear, but it confuses me even more because like the predictive measuring of it is like I know you didn't know that this was coming for real. So
yeah.
what were you really thinking?
I'm conflicted
um
with knowing that information because what if it's like not enough? What if he's like, I was high,
Yeah, right.
watching porn.
right, like if
Yeah.
Just something
Nolan,
basic, right? I was eating a grilled cheese sandwich, watching porno like I do.
yeah.
I was like, what if
Well,
the world turned into this sick place? But
yes,
yeah, no,
yes
I'd
and
get
no, and mainly I know that the Criterion Channel, the
Oh, that's
app
right. If Criterion produced it, then
that
there has to be all
produced it,
types of extras connected to it.
picked up. So it's weird on the app. You can find this. It's
Not
not
produced,
streaming,
present. Sorry.
but there are interviews of it, and then on their website there's articles. So I would be more interested from that end to be like,
There's articles
what?
on Criterion's website.
Yeah, Criterion has websites. Criterion websites has like breakdowns, articles on like people doing basically what we're doing, but less cool.
Cool. All right, great. Well, I think we're at that time, folks, where we should jump straight into our final thoughts.
All
Dino,
right,
take it away.
yeah, I'm glad you said it because I want to go first. Or I don't know if first, but anyway, I can't find the little banner for final thoughts, but we know what it is. Um, you're on mute, by the way, Marina. Where am I? There we go. Final thoughts. This is, by all accounts, a mind fuck, and it's something that I quite still, even us talking, we aren't quite sure. And again, I think we're saying like even his character is kind of bad, not an antagonist. You know you don't feel extremely sorry for him at the end because you don't really know what his deal is to begin with. At the very beginning, he's interested not just in pornography and snuff, but also like torture, like bringing up like torture. I guess you could say that's voyeurism. What people nowadays are like, we can just watch whatever we want, and it doesn't matter if it's not real. You know that sense of voyeurism of not to stay away, and they kept at least early on. You're not the one doing. It's fine and it's good because you're not the one doing the violence. You're not the one doing all this crazy shit. They're doing it for you. That being said, I know, or I believe, or it should be 1,000 movie list is revolving, right? Is that the AFI one? I feel like this one might go out of circulation from that list. Again, this is why I would be interested in Criterion Collection, seeing what they think of it or why they think a certain way. Just because there are so many movies out there, and I just feel like there are other movies that probably can tell this story or these themes that do it better uh, in a more modern way. So I could probably go the rest of my life and not recommend this to anyone. That's
Right on, right on.
that's I guess
Uh,
my final thought.
so my question to you is, before we get Marina's word, is you said that this are you what list are you saying that this should be pushed off of?
Well, I you brought it up that it's in the 1,001 films.
Okay. So just as a heads up, the 1001 list is only 1001 movies by title at this point. They add new movies to it every year. So really the 1001 list is something like, I don't know,
2001.
well not even that, not that many, not yet. Maybe like 11 or 1200 movies now.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'm just saying it could be they could start
Just push it off the list
trimming.
anyways. Just get rid of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They could start trimming the fat on the list.
Gotcha.
Um, it's it's a great study where this fits is if you're studying cinema throughout history or cinema kind of like you were interested in watching what was coming up in the 80s, right? And I feel that's where this would be an important film to watch because it's definitely fits a its own mold for that time period. But other than that, I just don't see the real value of needing to watch this film.
Gotcha.
Marina's cracking up. I imagine she agrees or is
Just love
listening
your
to some other.
political correctness. You're like, I would watch this if I was in a trailer in the garbage, but it would be nice if I had a soda. Yeah. Final thoughts. I think it's still weird, and I'm glad you guys agreed with me. Like I was really every time I think something's weird, I'm like, man, like this is on this is on a list. Like, man, am I really a cinephile? Do I belong here? Because I'm about to throw up. But then I got on here and you guys agreed with me that it was a little strange.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I mean, there was times what I will give it, if it was trying to be weird and trippy and make you feel weird and trippy, it worked. Like, I definitely feel like there's a consensus here. Like, it's almost like a hypnosis to it. Like, because
Yeah.
I couldn't stop watching it, but I was just like, Jason, why did you pick this movie? But it was it was really, really like I'm glad I didn't see it when I was a kid, kind of strange. Like, 'cause there was this one movie. What's that movie when like Colin Farrell like goes back with the aliens and stuff, and then like the little alien comes out the belly of the other creature?
Is it Total Recall or?
So I think it's one of those, and I would never forget that. And I feel like this is that kind of movie. If I would have watched it when I was like 7 or 8 years old, I would have just like,
Wait, your kid movie is not the original Total Recall, but the remake Total Recall?
I don't know. I don't know which one it was. It was one where this thing comes out of a belly, and I'll never forget that.
What you have
And
to understand, Dina, is that Marina's really young.
yeah, I don't know which one it was. I just know I shouldn't have been watching it, and I snuck up late and watched it on TV, and I'm traumatized. Same thing happened with Carrie. I was told I shouldn't watch it, and I had nightmares forever that they're all gonna laugh at me. Like I never listened, and I always watched that creepy stuff.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm gonna always imagine like a stomach getting ripped up and everything. So kind of to Dino's point, like recommendation wise, like I would probably recommend it to someone that like is like really in love with like how stuff has evolved over time, especially like special effects. If they're
Yeah.
into that, I'd be like, oh, you should watch this movie like when it was like the 80s, like when they really made it, because it wasn't bad, like it wasn't horrible. Like a lot of like the effects, like even though we know like even the hand and the TV bumpity bumpity, I could just imagine someone in the art department just inside that TV like rolling it around.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
I saw that. Right. Their knuckles push. Yeah.
Like I'm glad that there was something, because it was just at first I was like, whoa, like this is worse than Babadook. Like, get me out of here. Because it stresses me out when there's a message and it's just taking forever to come out. And then you like throw in some weird stuff, and then
Yeah.
who watches James Woods? It was just a lot of cons going on. So despite all that, like buy a thread, it definitely keeps you interested in what's going to happen. But then like my final disappointment is that I just never really get what happens either. So I was really like, betting on the finale. I think the most like pivotal moment was when you found out like his coworker was betraying him. Like I feel like that was the biggest plot where I was like, ooh, he was all a part of it. Like that was the most captivating moment to me, like because I understood that. I understand betrayal. I didn't understand a lot of the other points. So yeah, I probably won't watch it again. Um unless I get kidnapped and tortured and they're like, what do you want to be tortured to? And I'll be like, anything but Videodrome. And then, yeah. So those are my final thoughts.
Awesome. Great. So my final thought is I have all the same sentiments I believe that you guys have when it comes to this thing. But I will say this. I will say that I do think that this is an important film. I think it's an important film in film history, not just because of like the practical effects, but also because of the message that this movie's trying to get across. I think the problem with it is I'm starting to like piece it together the more we talk about it. I think the problem with it is that this movie has a message for a problem that didn't exist yet, and it just goes over everybody's head. And I think maybe in the last 20 years or so, when we've become more connected and have more access to like more video instantaneously, we start to understand what they're getting at in this thing. Because this movie could be made today just in a pretty different way. I don't think it would be as exciting as this movie is, because like we're almost bored with the technology that we have now. Um, as far as like what it's capable of doing and how it's constantly expanding, and maybe we're just bored. I think we're bored with what we're doing as a people with the technology that we have, like how we're using these resources. Um, and when this movie was made, those resources everybody didn't have access to them. So that kind of makes this movie kind of weird in a time loopy way in your mind. At the same time, it's playing with like these ideas of propaganda and programming, and it's dealing with like very provocative things and imagery. And so and they say it in the film, like how she likes to be stimulated, and like when the movie first comes on, they talk about like you know um we're being overstimulated. And it's like you thought you were being overstimulated in
Yeah.
1983. Well, sister, you just wait. Like we have
Well,
100 times more stimulation than that now. And look what it's doing to us now. Like, this is
yeah.
the predictiveness of this thing is like crazy to me. So I think in that regard, this movie becomes a little bit more important and worth discussing.
Right.
Now, do I like the film? I can't say that I would ever watch this again, but I can say this. I can say that I recommend it. I don't hate it so much that I wouldn't watch it again. I probably just won't watch it again. I won't put it on. Someone would have to like Marina, like that's kind of spoon feed this thing. Like, you want to watch Videodrome? And I'm like, nah, not really. They're like, but come on. I'm like, all right. But I think
I,
that
since you said you didn't hate it, I'm not. I hope people don't think that because I don't want to watch it or recommend it, that I hate it. It's not that. I just don't see much purpose to it. And just to add real quick to your thing is like all phones and iPads and everything, you can limit hours, especially for kids, right? Parents, well, parents you can put how much time a kid can be on certain, whether it's YouTube or TikTok or just on iPad or on a phone. So it just goes to show of the overstimulation part of it. Anyway, back to you, Jason.
Are you laughing because he got his points off, or what? Because
I'm laughing at like how ferociously my thought was derailed.
What?
I said how ferociously my thought was derailed. Uh, to wrap it up, I think I would recommend this to cinephiles, people who love the practical effects, and like Dino said, the people who might enjoy the historian aspect of like how these things are made and how they progressed. I think the art direction of the film in general has this creepy tone to it that is worth like studying. It pulls off like that old Wes Craven sort of almost Tim Burton-y kind of pre-Tim Burton-y thing where all those movies from the 80s that had like weird goony characters in it. It kind of has that sort of vibe. So I would recommend this to a host of people who are weirdos like this. People who go to midnight movies. I think this is worth recommending to. To the general public, I can't because I couldn't have anybody look at me and think that like, Jason, why would you recommend this to me? But like to civilians, absolutely not. This is not for you.
It's a good point. Like people that love those cult following movies, like they go to the old theaters
Right.
and kind of gave me, what's that movie with Jake Gyllenhaal where he keeps seeing rabbit?
Donnie Darko.
Johnny
Yeah,
Darko.
people who are into that
Yeah.
vibe, like people who come for the weird stuff, people who want to be cut on their shoulder,
If you
Well,
come for the
so
weird stuff, this movie is for you.
my final question, I guess, because yeah, when's the last time this aired on TV?
This has
And
never
what
aired on
channel?
TV.
Right?
And if it did,
Like,
that's a good question. Like cable, right? Like this thing. My bet would be HBO in the
yeah,
'90s.
On
yeah,
a Sunday
or
night. Can't you call out?
yeah, Cinemax or one of those. Can you imagine a TV version of this, especially like early in the '90s?
Especially like, what's weird? We're getting off track again, but like
Yeah.
when did they start letting people show boobies on TV? Like was it because like it was a show of a show? I don't know. Because
What
like they
show
were
has
like
boobies
naked.
on it? There's boobies on
Huh?
TV.
Yeah, I mean it's more common now, like that you'll see someone's like
You
breasts
mean on
out.
cable TV?
Yeah, I mean, or just like a movie, like
Yeah.
Oppenheimer, the girl had
Oh, like
like
in cinemas.
yeah.
Well, there's been nudity in cinemas. I mean, probably since like the '60s or '70s,
Mm.
like pretty
No,
legitimately.
before, but then there was the whole. It wasn't McCarthy. It was whatever in the history of cinema where they brought in the code. They brought in a code in the '50s or late '40s, and that was what films had to follow, and all that had to do
Are
with
you saying
nudity.
there was nudity in films in the '30s and '20s,
Yeah, it was
like that
way
played in
more.
cinemas?
Yeah, it was way more common, and then it was like And that's always been the thing. Every time that it seems, especially on the sexuality front, that it seems like it's getting more liberal or more open or whatever, then there's this huge whiplash of the conservative religious group. And that's the one thing that the rest of the world kind of is pointing at the US and how there are all this censorship of like boobs or full frontal or whatever, but action and murder and blood and gore is totally fine in film. So that's something that, you know, England and other countries are kind of like, US, what's going on? You're you're so disgusted by sex on TV or whatever, but
Well,
violence
these are
is
all
just
great thoughts to consider for the future. It's kind of funny because if Steve was here, I would ask him, "What do you got for us next week?"
well, I don't know why you are asking Steve, but he is not here. But it is his movie, and I guess I'll say what his movie is because he already preloaded it like a loaded gun, and I hope this is it. Ka-ching!
Pineapple
Right?
Express. He
We
brought this
haven't done
thing
that one,
full
right?
circle, Steve.
Yeah. Hey, another movie with guns and tripping out like this one.
Hey.
It'll
I,
be a
I
nice.
feel like both of these back to back could very well be stoner movies.
Oh shit!
This is an
Oh my.
accidental stoner movie, but
The
or
mean
maybe something
the
a little
mean
harder.
thing. Yeah, the mean thing would be get your friends to blaze up, watch Pineapple Express, and then be like, "Oh, let's watch Videorama or whatever it's called." Anyway, and then they'd be like,
Videorama right after this. All right.
"Yeah,
Well, for Marina, Dino, and me, Jason, we'll see you guys next week.
yeah, bye, 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 bye."